On November 8, 2010, gunshots broke the silence of a Markham, Ontario neighborhood. Inside the Pan family home, Bijha Pan was killed. Her husband, Han, was critically injured. At first, police treated it as a violent home invasion gone wrong. But as detectives dug deeper, they started to suspect that this wasn't a random break-in. Someone inside the family might have been involved. This video is about how extreme pressure, control, and fear of failure shaped the one's sense of self, and how that self-destruction drove them to an unforgivable crime. To understand how this happened, we have to look into the home the killer grew up in, the expectations one's parents had, the double life one was living, and the lies that kept getting bigger and harder to escape. The killer's story starts long before that night in 2010. Han and Bijha Pan immigrated to Canada from Vietnam in the late 1970s as refugees, after the Vietnam War had devastated the country and pushed many families to flee. They arrived with very little, but through thrift and constant hard work in auto parts manufacturing, they were eventually able to buy a home in Markham, Ontario in 2004. They had two children, Jennifer, born in 1986, and her younger brother, Felix, born in 1989. Like many traditional Asian parents, the Pans believed success meant good grades, a respectable profession, and financial stability. We sacrifice, so you must move up the social hierarchy. As their daughter, Jennifer appeared to be exactly what they wished. She studied piano, took figure skating lessons, competed in school events, and presented herself as a hard-working, high-achieving daughter. Her parents strictly controlled her schedule. They limited her social life, watched her activities closely, and forbade her from dating. She was supposed to be school, music, like a custom-made product, followed the path they'd chosen for her. On the other hand, Felix grew up with noticeably more freedom. He was able to choose his own hobbies, go to summer camps, stay out late, have a girlfriend, and his grades ranged from average to pretty bad without facing the same level of pressure Jennifer did. Felix said he believed that was partly because he took initiative and spoke up about what he wanted. Jennifer saw it differently. To her, it was simple. He was the son, and she was the daughter. At home, Han also enforced fairly traditional roles. The women were expected to handle most of the housework. Beach was overwhelmed with working, paying the bills, and running the household, and the fights between her and Han grew more frequent as the years went on. Jennifer was often the one pulled into the middle, asked to mediate between them, while Felix was even encouraged not to do chores. Even inside that house, they weren't carrying the same load. But stability always came with a cost. In high school, that control started to clash with Jennifer's real life. She began dating a classmate, Daniel Wong, a guy who worked at a local restaurant and dealt drugs on the side. He represented a lifestyle her parents deeply disapproved of. Jennifer kept the relationship secret as long as she could. When her parents eventually found out, they demanded she end it. They tightened the rules even more, limiting her phone and car use, monitoring her location, and trying to close any door that might lead her away from the future they designed for her. At the same time, their expectations for her career were very clear. They hoped she would go into something prestigious and stable as medicine or pharmacy, something that would show their sacrifices had paid off. But after showing early promise, Jennifer started to struggle academically, especially in high school. Instead of admitting that she was slipping, she made a different choice. She started forging report cards to make it look like she was getting straight A's. In grade 12, when she failed calculus, her early admission to Ryerson University was taken back. Instead of telling her parents the truth, she doubled down on the lie. Jennifer pretended she was still going to university. She spent her days in cafes, teaching piano, and working at a restaurant to earn money, all while telling her parents she was in class. To keep the story going, she claimed she'd won scholarships and later said she'd been accepted into a pharmacology program at the University of Toronto. She even bought second-hand textbooks, watched pharmacology videos, and filled notebooks with fake class notes so she could show her parents and keep up the illusion. At the same time, she asked for permission to stay near campus during the week, saying it was with a friend. In reality, she was often spending that time with her high school boyfriend, Daniel. By this point, Jennifer wasn't just telling the occasional lie. Her entire life, school, work, future plans, was a performance. On the outside, she was the hardworking university student her parents wanted. In reality, she was barely holding that story together. But no one can't hide something that big forever. Han and Bish started to notice gaps in Jennifer's story. There were no real tuition receipts, no official university documents. At one point, Beach actually followed Jennifer to see where she was going instead of just taking her word for it. That's when she realized Jennifer wasn't going to university at all. She had never graduated high school, and the entire education story was fake. When her parents discovered the deception, their reaction was intense. They were furious, not just about the grades, but about years of deception. In response, they tightened the leash even more. Jennifer's movements were heavily restricted. Her phone and computer were monitored. She wasn't allowed to see Daniel Wong. Her social life, which was already limited, almost completely disappeared. Even after being told to end the relationship, Jennifer and Daniel stayed in touch. They called and texted in secret, trying to keep their connection alive. Over time, their conversations shifted. They weren't just about school or stress anymore. Jennifer talked about feeling trapped and wanting out of her situation. At first, that meant fantasies about running away or disappearing. Later, those thoughts shifted into her wishing she were dead, just so the pressure would stop. But eventually, that idea of escape turned toward her parents. Jennifer and Daniel started discussing the idea of having her parents killed. They talked about money, about the house, and about how an attack could be staged to look like a robbery. Through Daniel's connections, Jennifer was introduced to people who were willing to use violence for payment. Before this, Jennifer's choices were destructive, but mostly towards herself while aimed at protecting her image and avoiding shame. Now that same fear and self-destruction were being directed at the two people who had raised her. She wasn't just lying to avoid their disappointment anymore. She was involved in planning a future where they wouldn't be alive at all. In the spring of 2010, Daniel Wong connected Jennifer with an acquaintance named Ricardo Duncan. According to what later came out, Jennifer allegedly offered Duncan around $1,500 to kill her father. Duncan told police he refused outright. That attempt went nowhere, but it didn't stop there. After that failed approach, Jennifer and Wong reached out to other people Daniel knew. Through those connections, prosecutors say they eventually arranged a deal with Lenford Crawford, David Milvaganam, and Eric Carty. The goal, according to the Crown, was now not just to kill Han, but both of Jennifer's parents. Jennifer made a partial payment and agreed that the rest would be paid after she received what she expected to be her inheritance, mostly from life insurance. On November 8, 2010, that plan was set in motion. That evening, Beach went out to her regular line dancing class and came home later that night. Jennifer spoke with her briefly when she came back. Later that night, Jennifer went downstairs and unlocked the front door, something her father normally wouldn't have allowed. According to the prosecution, 3 intruders entered the home and confronted Bitch first. Han was forced out of his bedroom. Both parents were taken down to the basement. Jennifer stayed upstairs. She later told police that she had been tied to the staircase and threatened along with her parents. In the basement, Han and Bish were forced to kneel. The intruders then shot them execution style. Bish died instantly. Han was gravely wounded, but he survived by pretending to be dead until the attackers left. While this was happening, Jennifer dialed 911. On the call, she sounded terrified.
Where are you, ma'am? Please just ma'am, calm down. What? Some people broke into our house and showed all his money. Okay, ma'am, where are you? What? Avenue Road. Yeah. Can you spell the name for me, please? Dad? Ma'am, Ma'am. Hello. Hello.
When police and paramedics arrived, they found Beach dead in the basement, Han barely alive and rushed to hospital, and Jennifer upstairs with her hands loosely bound. At first, police treated Jennifer as a victim. She was the daughter who just survived a home invasion, but that theory didn't last very long. As detectives started going through the scene and Jennifer's statements, small things stood out. The front door had been left unlocked, even though Han was usually strict about security. Jennifer's hands were loosely tied in a way that made it seem possible she could reach her phone. Very few valuable items were actually taken from the house, even though this was supposed to be a robbery. Investigators also started listening closely to Jennifer's behavior and her 911 call. They pulled phone records, they checked text messages and call logs, they looked at cell tower data to see who was where and when. The record showed a pattern of contact between Jennifer, Daniel Wong, and some of the men later accused of taking part in the attack before, during, and after the supposed home invasion. There were texts around the time the door was left unlocked. There were calls that didn't line up neatly with the story Jennifer had given them. Detectives brought Jennifer back in for multiple interviews. At first, she repeated the same version. Strangers broke in, tied her up, took her parents to the basement, and shot them. Over time, as investigators confronted her with more details, her story started to shift. In a later interview, Jennifer admitted she had had some involvement, but tried to frame it differently. She claimed she hadn't planned to kill her parents, but had arranged for men to come to the house and kill her instead. In this version, she presented it as a kind of suicide by hitmen. She said she was depressed, felt trapped, and wanted to die, not to hurt her parents. For police, this raised even more questions. Then, another major shift in the case happened. Han Pan woke up from his coma. When he was strong enough to talk, he gave his version of what he remembered from that night. According to Han, when the intruders came into the house, he did not see Jennifer tied to the banister. He remembered seeing her walking around, talking with at least one of the men. To him, she didn't look like a helpless hostage. His memory directly clashed with the story Jennifer had been telling from day one. At that point, Jennifer was no longer just a surviving daughter with a strange story. She was someone whose phone records, changing statements, and her own father's testimony were all pointing in the same direction. Detectives concluded that the home invasion was staged and that Jennifer had been at the center of planning it. Eventually, Jennifer Pan, Daniel Wong, and others involved were arrested and charged. On December 13, 2014, Jennifer, Daniel, and several of the other men were found guilty of first-degree murder for Beach's death and attempted murder for the shooting of Han. They were all given life sentences with no chance of parole for 25 years. Han read a victim impact statement describing his physical pain and the emotional reality of knowing his daughter helped plan the attack. He has chosen to cut off all contact with her. After the trial, Han's life didn't magically reset. He was alone, physically limited, in chronic pain, and unable to work the way he used to. By most accounts, he struggled with depression and tried to lean on Felix for emotional support, but Felix often avoided talking about the murder and eventually moved away to work and be with his girlfriend. In the end, this isn't just a story about a daughter who killed. It's also a story about a son who left and a father who ended up alone. A family can look normal from the outside, good grades, steady jobs, a nice house, and still be full of fear, pressure, and twisted silence on the inside. If nobody is allowed to be honest, to fail, or to say, "I can't handle this," the damage doesn't always show up the right away. Sometimes it shows up years later in the worst possible way. If you grew up under this kind of pressure or in a house where no one talked about what was really going on, please reach out for help. You're not alone. This is Rational Ends. Let me know your thoughts in the comments and please subscribe.